Good day, mates. I am Aquata, although you know me as Mordecai's Familiar, and welcome back to the show, where Mordecai would tell you that he is a relatively inexperienced roleplayer who narrates various RPG-related stories as a learning tool. Since Mordecai is away having a nice little party, it falls upon me to present the narration for this video. Sometimes people like to assign roles to a particular class depending upon what the class primarily does, whilst the party is engaged with an unfavourable situation, such as combat. Thus, bards and clerics are usually healers, whilst you might have a barbarian as a frontline to separate the hostiles from the more fragile party members. However, some classes are capable of functioning in multiple roles, sometimes quite well. Let's use Mordecai as an example player character. As a warlock, he's good at being able to deal damage from a distance. As a celestial warlock, he can also fill in the role of being a healer in a pinch. Understanding when to blast and when to heal is crucial if we want to play Mordecai in a hyper-optimal manner that has the party really appreciate him in combat. But what about if Mordecai completely focused on healing and never considered diversifying away from a designated role that could leave the party in more dire straits? Well, let's delve into a story in which a similar situation occurs in-game. Before we get started with the narration, if you enjoy the content here on the channel, feel free to subscribe and like the video. It helps out, is free to do, and you can always change your mind later. And so, we shall proceed with a delve into the often horrifying plane of r/RPG horror stories. The narrative for this video is titled The Cleric Who Refuses to Heal Even Himself, and is written by Easy Recognition 2798. I am posting this using a throwaway account for good reasons. Compared to the other stories, this is probably not much of a horror story, and I'm more just on the need to write and post this to vent, especially since it's still fresh. So I apologize if I am rambling and all over the place. We have a cleric who has been playing really well and balanced as our support and healer, and can pack a punch too when needed for offense. Apparently, he got into an online argument about the cleric class on Facebook. I don't know where he went for the argument, but he was ranting about it to us on our Discord channel. To summarize, apparently he was peeved off that some people were arguing about a post on clerics being more than just healers. We chatted about it and basically agreed with Cleric that he really can do some pretty nifty damage, and even could do a one-turn knockout on a horde of zombies with his Destroy Undead. We told him to ignore those people, that he's an awesome cleric, and he should just continue doing him. That conversation was most likely the trigger as to why he started playing more offensively and healed/casted buffing spells much less frequently. And I get it, I also played as a cleric before, and they can deal some major damage when they decide to be on the offense. The thing is, the cleric class, at least with how our cleric was playing him in combat, isn't built to focus on dealing as much damage as possible, but to be a balance between support, healing, and damage. The few combats on the first session we had after he vented in our Discord, although our group's combat dynamics became kinda off, we weren't really bothered by it and kinda just rolled with it. Roleplay-wise, Wizard just lightly pointed out by commenting along the lines of, "Feeling a bit on the violent side today, eh?" When Cleric cheered hard every time he managed to kill any enemies. Our initial nonchalance might be because the enemies we faced were not high-level threats, as that session was more focused on investigation and rallying important allies. His behavior, however, also started becoming unpleasant at times. He developed a sort of one-sided rivalry with our fighter. For your information, I also play a fighter, under a different subclass though, who was our main melee damage dealer, and the wizard, whose attack spells focused on area effects, when in combat. He was noticeably projecting the people who argued with him online onto us, especially with comments like, Yeah, now you need the cleric to solve your problems? Or, darn, good luck guys, I hope you don't die when the cleric's not with you to keep you alive when our party separated. Like, bro, none of us ever invalidated your cleric? Like, ever? What point are you trying to prove to us? Me personally, I got pretty peeved when he once flaunted how much more damage he did than my fighter, and my response was, yeah, duh? Because unlike our other fighter, I built mine to be a tank and combat support. You know, so he can be the shield and divert attacks away from you guys? Which was just casually brushed off. The DM has already berated him on it by pointing out that we're not the people that argued or invalidated his cleric on Facebook. He doesn't need to prove a point to us because we acknowledge his essential role as a cleric. And to stop taking out his frustration on us and our characters, we echoed our DM's sentiments and he thankfully stopped his comments. But then, nonsense started to go downhill super fast when we faced off one of the villains of the campaign and her servants. Strategy-wise, the villain focused more on giving us curses or debuffs, whilst her minions dealt the damage and prevented us from trying to get to her. Some of us were poisoned, blinded for several turns, frightened to name some of the debuffs. It was a frustrating fight, but it was even more frustrating that Cleric refused to cast spells that can resolve our conditions or heal anyone, even himself. Every time it was his turn, he would only cast offensive Cleric spells like Guiding Bolt, even using his higher level spell slots to cast them. Sure, he did damage when his spells hit, but he repeatedly fell unconscious, especially when he thought it would be a wonderful idea to run headlong into the middle of the enemy crowd and be surrounded by them just so he could cast his spiritual guardians. We collectively groaned when he said, "I am a cleric. I keep the party alive, and the best way to keep the party alive is by killing those that are trying to kill us first." When in combat, the Bard, who is usually our strategist and the one making it easier for us to hit and kill things, ended up having to be the main healer with her healing words and healing potions, especially every time the cleric fell unconscious. The situation turned really dire when it's just the Bard still standing, cursed with taking 1d8 damage every turn, and outnumbered 3 to 1. One of the minions hasn't even been damaged yet. The cleric's player went off on her, telling her to heal him back awake. Desperate and thinking that he would cast Mass Healing Word to get us all back on our feet, she did so. And you know what the cleric decided to do? He used his main action for an offensive cantrip. I forgot the name, but basically those within his melee range gets attacked, and then his bonus action to cast Spiritual Weapon at a higher level. Unfortunately, both of those spells missed. What's even better, the villain used her turn to attack the cleric, and with just the Bard's 5 health points of healing he got, he was obviously taken out. Again. We were close to a total party wipeout, and even the DM sounded visibly distressed at how the battle was turning out. The Bard managed to survive another enemy round. She was close to being taken out as well, but somehow managed to survive both the minion's turn and the villain's turn, and succeeded her save to end the curse. When it was the Bard's turn again, the Cleric's player had the audacity to demand her to heal him back awake again. She ignored him this time, and woke me instead with her last potion because I was exactly next on the turn order, and also had a potion to help another player. The Cleric groaned and demeaned her for it. She replied with, "Since she's a character with a strong strategic mind, given what just went down, it was what she would have done." Which has got to be one of the most satisfying, "it's what my character would do" I've ever heard. I then managed to give the fighter, who I might add was on his last death save, the only potion I had used Action Surge to finish off a minion with disadvantage because I was still poisoned, and Commander struck the fighter into attacking the villain who was next to him and landing a whopping huge natural 20 on her. Still not dead though. The wizard's turn came up, with him making a death save, and by some digital dice miracle, he also rolled a natural 20, and revived to exactly 1 hit point. This was where we got a little bit sidetracked because this was the first time anyone rolled a natural 20 on a death save in our group. We weren't sure if the wizard was allowed to do anything on the turn he was arrived by a natural 20 death saving throw, but regardless, the DM decided to allow one action and will apply it for any future natural 20 death savings in his games. With that, the wizard used the Scorcher spell, I forgot the full name, but basically fire damage in a straight line at a higher level, and with that killed the villain. We ended that session by dragging the last living minion back to our base. We stuck around longer after that in the voice channel to discuss the session and did a bit of analysis on the combat with some metagaming knowledge. The Cleric's player was peeved off, and complained that he could have finished that fight and got us all out of that situation faster if the bard had healed him. The DM challenged him on that and asked him exactly what he would have done if the bard had chosen to heal him awake again, and he said that he would do the exact same thing that he did with the missed spells. As how I've laid out how the battle went downhill from there, even if he managed to land both spells and took out the villain, they'd still end up getting wiped out by any of the 2 remaining enemies with what's left of their hit points. That was one thing, but then the bard brought up an interesting point. Wait, how many spell slots do you even have left? He stalled a little in answering by saying he'll check his character sheet, then stumbled in his words. Guess what? He only had his cantrips left, and several low-level spell slots. His spiritual weapon would have been casted at its lowest level if he had pulled through on his plans, which means that, even if he landed both spells and both had dealt full damage, he and the bard would have also been wiped out on the enemy's turns. The revelation made things awkward in the chat for a moment, so the DM directed the conversation to the fighter and wizard's natural 20 miracles that happened at the last moment. Our second fighter also added that even he wasn't sure that we could have won despite his natural 20, and even revealed that during the combat he had private messaged the DM for some way to let him sacrifice his character so that the others could escape and survive. I gave a bit of an input/question on the encounter's difficulty level, and the cleric chimed in that the encounter was too rough. The DM told us that although the encounter was made to be difficult, befitting of one of the main villains, it wasn't the most difficult encounter we have faced compared to some other high-threat encounters we had had. He pointed out that we had fought harder enemies before with even worse rolls. For some reason we had several snake eyes on one of the encounters. Plus, we were even at a lower level back then, and we still managed to beat them. At some point of our conversation, the wizard went frontal with the cleric, asking why he wouldn't heal anyone, even himself, that it wasn't cool to make Bard deplete a lot of her spell slots for healing words, whilst he kept on abandoning us like that whilst we were dying. The cleric got defensive and argued back that everyone else had a form of healing or self-healing to take care of themselves except for the wizard, but even then he also had a potion, which is why Cleric assumes that everyone will be fine. He got rebutted on that when we pointed out that everyone, including himself, was knocked out except for the bard, and the fighter was so close to making a new character with his 2 failed death saves. I don't remember what else was argued, but I think it struck a chord in Cleric, who got pretty quiet when the wizard more or less said something like, "If you had stopped caring about our characters, at the very least you could still try to care about your own character, Instead of caring more about proving a point to a bunch of internet strangers you argued with like 3 weeks ago. They're not even here to watch our sessions and see you prove them wrong. Hell, even if they were watching our sessions, you're not exactly proving yourself right either. As a party, we more or less echoed Wizard's feelings, and then the Cleric just abruptly left the voice channel. We're not sure what's gonna happen next session, but the DM says he'll discuss things with Cleric after giving him some time to cool off. And that's where we are now. I don't know how to end this post. I feel better after regurgitating this out in writing though. Have a good week, I guess? The story itself continues with an update in a separate post on the subreddit. Without further delay, the second part of the story is titled Update: The Cleric Who Refuses to Heal Even Himself, and is likewise written by Easy Recognition 2798. Holy helm, I didn't think I'd get this much track. So some things to address before I update. I've read some of your comments. It was rather overwhelming, and I'm genuinely sorry for not replying to all of the comments, but I really appreciate it. Some of the commenters even complained about how long my post was, and my bad, I guess. I was just regurgitating my frustrations out in writing, and didn't think anyone would even bother reading it because of exactly how obnoxiously long it was. Like I had originally said, I just needed to vent. Additionally, some people pointed out that our cleric might have commented on the previous post, and despite my long rant and complaints, neither me and the DM think he's that obnoxious. I did ask the cleric just out of curiosity anyway, and he was horrified that anyone would think said commenter was him. And to those who gave that post awards, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, but this is just a throwaway account, and I think your badges would be better awarded to those that actually deserve it more. I feel kinda bad about receiving them. Even so, it is still very much appreciated. So here's the actual update some of you requested, and I'll get straight to the point. We worked things out, we're cool again, and this current post I made has gone through both the cleric and the DM for their perusal and approval. For those who don't like to read long posts, that's all you really need to know, I guess. You can move on to some other stories now. For those who want some more detail, the next 3 slides... Oh wait, you're reading. Haha, it's more than 3 slides. The DM had a talk with the cleric, and had showed him my previous post. He admitted he got carried away because he got so salty about people talking nonsense about the cleric class on Facebook. There's always that kind of nonsense talk about any class. We all at some point have gotten offended over people talking nonsense about classes we love playing. Like rangers being useless, fighters being basic, wizards easily dying, bards are just weaker sorcerers and less effective clerics, etc, etc. Which the DM relayed to the cleric and told him not to take their words to heart. Some of your comments also helped, so thank you for that, guys. They then discussed exactly how the cleric wanted to play his character from here in, because it was becoming out of character for his lawful neutral brave cleric to suddenly enjoy killing and even keeping a kill count in the party. His character is supposed to guard the balance in order of life and death, and his main mission in our story is to put all of the undead raised by the BBEG to be finally put to rest. We solved that issue in game. He played it by being frustrated over a previous grievous incident. He apologized to the party after being visited by his god in his dreams, and having a heart-to-heart with the bard. Apparently during the DM and cleric's discussion they also roped in bard's player who was free at the time and seemed relevant, as an example to whatever they were discussing, because in the party she doesn't do much damage and had very little kill counts thus far. In direct combat, at least. But she gets a lot, if not most of our praise, both in and out of combat, for her use of her spells, and the Big Five. The Bard's Big, Bad, Beautiful... baloney. Basically our term of endearment for Bard's effective shenanigans and strategies. Whatever they discussed seemed to work. We apologized to him if we ever made him feel invalidated as a cleric, and for ganging up on him last session. He apologized for the way he acted. I also apologized for making that post about him, and offered to delete it and this account, but he says nah, let people discuss and learn from it. So that's it, I guess. Thanks guys, have a great week. And that's where the story actually ends. I want to say that this story has a suitably happy ending, where the party and the in-the-moment problem player managed to reconcile their differences, and the party has gotten back to their usual happy medium. All in all, this story as a whole serves as a really good demonstration for a good method to get issues at the table resolved, even though it started off less than ideally with the party being angry at the Cleric. There are a wide variety of lessons that can be learned from both parts of the story. From the main part, we have one of the best applications of the "it's what my character would do" being used in a manner that supports the party as a whole and enables them to salvage a bad situation, even converting it into a victory. Another important lesson that can be learnt is a distinct warning on the dangers of allowing an outside influence to drastically alter how you play your characters. Under normal circumstances, the Cleric would have focused on a blend between dealing damage and keeping their party safe with healing spells. However, with the recent hostile discussion on clerics over social media, the Cleric must have felt some pressure to showcase to the folks on the other side of the screen that they were wrong, by attempting to play his Cleric in a manner to which the character and fellow party members were not accustomed. Suffice to say, this was a rather bad idea. The most important lesson that can be considered from the update to the original story is to be aware of and consider it towards your fellow party members and players at the table. If someone at the table is having a bad time, and the entire group has a dynamic where everyone is genuine friends or they try to genuinely support each other, then being able to talk about issues and prevent them from permanently impacting the table is highly recommended. As was the case with this group and story, the Cleric acting out of character for the problem session became a moment of heartfelt roleplay at the table, and a reaffirmation as to how good the Cleric actually was outside of the original incident. Thank you sincerely for watching, dear viewers. If you enjoyed the narration, feel free to subscribe and like the video. After all, it is free to do, and you can always change your mind later. And with the video wrapped up, I shall now go and party alongside my boss. And I shall see you all next time!